Hey guys, I really appreciate that you got me to 150 subscribers. I do hope you enjoy this special. What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say, working here would suck? Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic, you should know that if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. My wife actually did this on her interview about working on some Saturdays. She politely refused on grounds of traveling time but obliged to chip in from home if a client needed something urgently. She got the job. Do they make her work on Saturdays? I too would like to know if she won or lost from working at this place and if she's now working Saturdays. They told me all about their generous severance packages. In the initial interview. Turnover City. Unless you get them to sign it in your contract. Yikes. Jesus, yeah, that's definitely a red flag. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken, hope he's somewhere else now. On a second interview, the general manager brought me into the conference room with his 8 managers present. At first I thought it was a meet and greet, but no, they grilled me for an hour and a half, didn't appreciate that along with a couple other things, and politely withdrew from being considered. Couple months later I'm playing in a ball tournament and come across one of the managers. I mentioned how weird that interview was. He says, "Weird for you? Ha. I found out then and there you were being interviewed for my job." Yep, dodged a bullet there. Oof, that's gotta sting. Sounds like my company. P.S. Even if HR says there can't be retribution for speaking up for another employee, they lie. Og. Good review with pay raise. SEP director harassed by vice president increases. Oct complaint filed. Second person to file this year. I'm interviewed. I know I'll pay for what I say. But what is right, so I follow my conscience. 1 week later demoted by the VP, and my boss, who filed complaint, is now out on leave till end of year. Jan boss resigns, mutual agreement, nothing happens to VP. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. Since when is it legal to have employees working and not paying them? What a psycho. In America, we have the freedom to stongarm our employees into working unpaid overtime. It truly is the land of liberty and justice for all. Nope, very illegal. No, it's not. Depending on the job, if you're a true salaried employee you don't get paid extra to work on the weekend, and that's not illegal. If it was, every major accounting firm would be sued out of business. I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong, I noticed that when that question came up they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo, and even when COVID hit they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Very smart. My last bad job was one where the supervisor took me around and rattled off a non-stop stream of details. I got out my notepad and a pen. We don't have time for that. Mind if I ask what the best training you received was like? My company has tripled in size and we're now, finally, putting a training program into place, with the goal of building out various career paths. I'd love to hear what worked and didn't, as I've never worked for a company with either of those things before. Yes. This right here. This is the way. I always ask about OJT, because my philosophy is, every job is different, nobody could possibly waltz in and know the job inside and out. There should always be a learning curve of sorts. If there is none, that could be a sign that management holds a zero-defect mentality. I had a job interview this week which was set up by a recruiter. Leading up to the interview there were several red flags. I found out there was high turnover for the position. They were focused on finding someone with very specific software experience, which I had, but it was about 3 years ago. The HR manager called me unannounced. All communications had been through the recruiter prior to this, and they told me the morning of that I had a Zoom interview at 4 p.m., after the recruiter had been trying to contact them for over 24 hours. The kicker? I got into the interview, which apparently was only a phone interview, and they told me how underqualified I was for the position, then proceeded to ask me to interview for a junior role which I was overqualified for. I ended the interview 12 minutes in. When they ask out of nowhere what clients can you bring with you? I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. Sure, it wasn't an interview with an MLM. A lot of the supplemental insurances in the US are set up like MLMs. I know Aflac is the same way. I learned that about Aflac the hard way, =/. My favorite is there's a lot of people waiting in line to work here. Count yourself lucky. Huge red flag. After my last job I have learned to take the attitude that in interviewing the job, too, I used to think, well, I need a job, and let myself think it was sweet that I was being given the chance, but I have a great work ethic so I always become the man. Supervisors seem to love that term. Well, I've learned that when they say that they mean they are going to heap a lot more work and responsibility on you than your co-workers, so, now I go into interviews with the attitude that I can always find another job, so I judge the company now. Prove it. What's your favorite color? I don't understand, sorry. What's the relation between brown, UPS, and this interview? This actually happened to me. Interviewer, do you have any questions for us? Me, what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer, job security. LMAO, gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. Dude probably about to quit and was like, better save this guy before I dip. A true homie. How do you even answer after that? Just okay and walk away? When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I hate that in any situation, not just jobs. Buying something big like a car and they're like, oh, it's just standard contract stuff. Let me decide if it's standard. You know full well if I sign this I've agreed to whatever is written. Company, standard contact stuff, don't need to read it, just sign. Also company, when in court, you should have read the contract to know what you were signing. I declined a job last month that had a non-compete clause that they really don't enforce. I asked, if you don't enforce it, why is it in the contract then? No good answer. Then I called the last guy that had the job to ask him, and he let me know, at great personal risk, their lawyers contacted him that week to enforce the non-compete. I didn't know it at the time, but, you'll be wearing many hats, was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. And a hat modeling agency motto. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself, from the company. This is illegal in most US states, unknown about outside the US. Wait, really? This happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't, lol. LMAO, they wanted you to purchase it and give it to them once you left? That's absurd. That's funny because that's actually happened to me recently. I laughed and told them to go themselves, lol. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities or day-to-day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what. That led to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. I was interviewed for a job like this. When I walked into the interview, it was made clear that the job was being offered and was mine if I wanted it. On my credentials alone, it was a library supervisor job at a rare items and fine arts library. An hour into the interview, despite asking several times, they couldn't tell me what I would be doing. Slowly, it came out that there were frequent fights in the library I would need to break up, student mental breakdowns I would somehow have to handle as a mental health professional. The kicker was that the library held a lot of fine art, and I would need to stop people from, literally, stealing the Warhols. They wanted a librarian who I guess was somehow Batman. I got an email that the position was dissolved 6 months later. Haha. Sounds like you narrowly avoiding being the protagonist of a sequel to Night at the Museum. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I feel like that would put a lot of pressure on the employee to not say anything to dissuade an applicant and upset management. Yeah, 1, they'd never pick me to talk to you, and 2, they'd pick the person who will kiss and lie. The statement included the applicant picking an employee, not management. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. I asked this at one of my first interviews right out of school. My interviewer went, "That's a good question," and was ruminating for a good 2 minutes. She went with, "We get pretty good parking spots," and quickly followed with, "And the people are nice." People are nice is actually a good one, sometimes can be the only real reason that the work doesn't outright suck. It's a question I always ask. Watch the interviewers' faces when you ask. They'll react honestly immediately with their expressions before they answer. If their face falls or they look confused or annoyed, delta out of there. Best job I had. The interviewer broke into the most lovely smile and then gushed about the place for 10 minutes. We only want the best of the best. Me, how much are you paying? Minimum wage. Salary, competitive $, pound, euro. Reality, minimum wage. Salary, competitive. Reality, competitive to sweatshops. They are competitive, alright. But the competition is who can pay you the least. Salary, competitive. Reality, not competitive. If they seem too relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work, tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work a different department than what I applied for. Makes you wonder if they told the missing hires to show up somewhere else. Maybe they're actually still working for the company in the other department. Did you tell them sure thing, for twice the wage you were applying for? I had this happen to me, applied for and got one job. When I showed up they sent me to a different department. I hated it but was able to transfer after 3 months. You'll get full-time hours but won't be full-time, aka we'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. I once worked in a grocery store, under a union, hired for part-time, consistently, was scheduled 40 HR/week until the third week of the month, then I worked 39 HRs that week. It kept them from giving me benefits. You should be considered full-time at 35 HRs. Edit, 30 hours, not 35. It is actually 30, here is what it says on the IRS website. For purposes of the employer shared responsibility provisions, a full-time employee is, for a calendar month, an employee employed on average at least 30 hours of service per week, or 130 hours of service per month. Edit, not how I thought I would get my first medals. Thanks, stranger. Wait, if 30 HRS is full-time, how are so many people not getting full-time benefits with the 38 HRS BS? Your salary is completely commission-based and you won't get paid for 2 months, every solar panel sales job. Edit, I interviewed at a few, not everyone has 2 months worth of savings right now. I interviewed at a place that does solar install, fiber install, home security, satellite dishes, etc. Interviewer asked me, would you rather be paid $8 per hour with 50-cent commission, or $10 to $12 per hour with 10-cent commission? She wasn't happy when I asked how long it takes to make a sale. Also, just that questing is garbage. She did also ask, how much would you need to make per month to feel secure? There were so many flags about pay in her questions, I'm surprised she ever hired anyone. Holy, I'm a fiber optics tech who's slowly going to school for solar installation, and simply as a technician that sounds like my dream job. Sales through, I just wanna build not trying to separate people from their money. Hello, sorry for my ignorance, but what exactly do you do as a solar panel seller?